Engine air temperature sensor. Before we dive in, quickly subscribe, like and share. The major function of the air charge temperature sensor, also called intake air temperature sensor, IAT, monitors the temperature of the air gaining access to the engine. This information is required by the engine computer to evaluate air density, for the sole purpose of balancing air/fuel mixture. Since colder air is denser than hot air, cold air requires more fuel to maintain an equal air/fuel ratio. The PCM changes the air/fuel proportion by changing the length or time of the injector pulses. This sensor is called air charge temperature sensor on pre-OBD2 vehicles, 1995 and older. It can also be called vane air temperature, VAT, sensor, manifold charging temperature, MCT, sensor, manifold air temperature, MAT, sensor, charge temperature sensor, CTS. Where is the air charge temperature sensor located in a car? The intake air temperature charge, IAT, sensor in a car is located at the bottom of the intake manifold, which is directly behind the throttle valve housing. How does the air temperature sensor work? Normally, the intake air temperature sensor is mounted in the intake manifold, in such a way that the tip will be exposed to air gaining access to the engine. For engines that use mass airflow, MAF, sensors to check the air volume entering the engine, the MAP sensor will also have an air temperature sensor built into it. The air temperature sensor is a thermistor, meaning its electrical resistance changes in response to temperature changes. Occupants. What causes an air temperature sensor to fail? Air temperature sensors can sometimes be damaged by miscarrying or backfiring in the intake manifold. The tip of the sensor can also be coated by carbon and oil contamination inside the intake manifold. When this happens, it makes it less responsive to sudden changes in air temperature. The air temperature sensor may also deteriorate with age or heat, leading to a slower or no response. Poor electrical connections at the sensor can also lead to sensor problems. A loose or rusty wiring connector can affect the output of the sensor. Damaged wiring in the circuit between the sensor and PCM can also lead to malfunction. What are the symptoms of a failed air temperature sensor? If the intake air temperature sensor fails to read accurately, the PCM may think the air is warmer or colder than it actually is, causing it to misjudge the air/fuel mixture. This can lead to a lean or rich fuel mixture that causes drivability symptoms. These signs may include stumble on cold acceleration, poor idle quality when cold, surging when the engine is warm. If the sensor isn't reading accurately when the engine computer uses the air temperature sensor input to turn on a cold start injector, it may thwart the cold start injector from being operational, hence leading to a hard cold start condition. How can the air temperature sensor be diagnosed? There's a probability of a faulty air temperature sensor setting or not setting a code and turning on the check engine light. A code will usually be set if the sensor circuit is open or shorted. However, if it is only reading high or low, or is slow due to old age or contamination, it will usually not set a code. You can use a scan tool to compare the air temperature reading to the coolant temperature reading when the engine is warm. This is the quickest way to check the air temperature sensor. A good air temperature sensor will typically read a few degrees cooler than the coolant sensor. Apart from the method above, you can also check the sensor's resistance using an ohm meter. This can be done by removing the sensor and connecting the two leads on the ohm meter to the two pins in or on the sensor's wiring connector plug to measure the resistance of the sensor. Measure the sensor's resistance when cold, then blow hot air at the tip of the sensor with a blow dryer and measure the resistance again. Warning: never use a propane torch to measure the sensor's resistance. You should only use a blow dryer. How to replace, repair, and adjust air temperature sensor. It is impossible to adjust the air temperature sensor since it is a solid-state device. However, a dirty sensor may be cleaned so that it functions normally as long as it is still in a good functional state. You can get rid of contaminants from the tip of the sensor by removing the sensor from the intake manifold, using electronics cleaner to spray the sensor tip. For sensors mounted inside a MAF sensor, the wire sensing element can also be sprayed with aerosol electronics cleaner. Avoid using any other type of cleaner because it may destroy the plastic housing, or leave behind a chemical residue that may eventually lead to faults later on. You should replace a sensor that has failed, or that is not reading within specifications. Luckily, most air temperature are not very expensive and the workmanship charged to change the air temperature sensor is usually not high unless the sensor is buried under a lot of other stuff that would warrant it to be removed. Exercise caution when replacing the air temperature sensor. Do not tighten it too much, because it may damage the threads in a plastic intake manifold or destroy the sensor housing. I hope this video was educating. Don't forget to subscribe, like and share.